Welcome to the edge of speed and survival, a sky where every second decides life or death, and where 611 kilometers per hour is not just a number, it's the difference between hunter and hunted. 8th June 1943, USS Essex Pacific Theater. Smoke curls from the deck, stinging lungs with the acrid tang of aviation fuel. Engines roar as steel shudders under the weight of expectation. Deck crews move with precise urgency, every footstep measured, every gesture rehearsed. Pilots grip control sticks, eyes scanning instruments, waiting for a single order. The wind whips past, carrying the metallic scent of fuel and salt water. This is the Pacific, indifferent and endless, where men and machines face the invisible pressure of speed and timing. Engines hot, steel vibrates, and then the order cuts through the noise, all engines full throttle. Check your gauges. Let's fly. Wheels lift. The deck trembles with each plane catapulted into the sky. Smoke lingers. Voices over the radio are clipped, urgent, layered atop the hum of engines pushed beyond expectation. Each Hellcat becomes more than a plane. It becomes a finely tuned machine of trust, discipline, and lethal efficiency. This is why 611 kilometers per hour made the U.S. Navy F6F Hellcat a sky killer. In the briefest moments, seconds stretch into eternity. Pilots climb into the blue, aware that speed alone can carve victory from chaos. Each heartbeat echoes the same truth: survival depends on precision training and the mechanical advantage of the Hellcat. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share your moment, your feeling, your connection to the sky these pilots once ruled. Let's make this experience as immediate and personal as the roar of those engines. June 1943, Pacific Theater. By mid-1943, the Pacific War had stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. Each island a potential death trap, each carrier a fragile outpost floating in a vast, indifferent sea. The U.S. Navy faced an enemy that on paper seemed invincible. Japanese Zero fighters dominated the skies early in the war, agile, light, and deadly in the hands of veteran pilots. Allied intelligence painted a picture of superiority: experienced airmen, rigorous training, and aircraft capable of outmaneuvering almost any Allied plane in a dogfight. It was a daunting challenge, one that haunted the minds of planners aboard the Essex, Yorktown, and Enterprise. The answer came in the form of a new fighter, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, designed to rewrite the rules of air combat. Its origins were deliberate, methodical, a response to every defeat and every failure the Navy had suffered in 1941 to 1942. Engineers studied wreckage, analyzed engagement reports, and debated tirelessly over specifications. The Hellcat needed speed to survive armor, to endure hits, and firepower to dominate. It needed to be a plane that could turn the tide without requiring superhuman skill from its pilots, allowing crews of varying experience to achieve victory. Training was equally meticulous. Pilots selected for the Hellcat program underwent weeks of conditioning on land before ever reaching a carrier deck. Flight instructors drilled them on emergency procedures, formation flying, and gunnery drills, emphasizing muscle memory under duress. They learned the aircraft's limits intimately: maximum speed, climb rate, fuel endurance, and structural thresholds. Engineers and mechanics worked side by side with aviators, noting subtle quirks, oil pressure fluctuations at high RPM, the way control surfaces responded at extreme angles, and the optimal approach for catapult launches. Losses during training were harsh lessons. Approximately 12% of early Hellcat pilots were grounded due to mishaps or accidents, underscoring the stakes even before combat began. Every sortie began with careful planning. Squadron leaders charted paths, noting enemy positions and ocean currents, reviewing intelligence reports that sometimes conflicted. The Japanese Zero was known for its maneuverability, but it lacked armor and firepower. Timing and logistics would flip the map. The Hellcat could carry more ammunition, sustain hits, and maintain high speed over longer distances. When deployed in coordinated formations, Hellcats transformed these advantages into a force multiplier, making superior numbers or raw agility of the enemy less relevant. In these early months, morale and belief were fragile commodities. Pilots often entered briefing rooms under the shadow of recent defeats, hearing the figures: mission success rates, aircraft lost, comrades killed. Yet the Hellcat offered a new promise. It was a tool of confidence, a mechanical answer to uncertainty. Pilots trained on simulators and practice ranges, learning the interplay between human reflex and mechanical precision until executing high-speed maneuvers became instinctual. The deck crews practiced rapid refueling and arming, shaving minutes off launch cycles, ensuring that Hellcats could surge into the air at the exact moment advantage was achievable. By the summer of 1943, the stage was set. Allied command had mapped every airfield, every island approach, every choke point across the Pacific. They believed the enemy was stronger until timing, logistics, and the mechanical superiority of the Hellcat flipped the map. The aircraft's top speed of 611 kilometers per hour, combined with its durability and firepower, made the difference. One well-coordinated strike could decimate squadrons previously considered untouchable. Every pilot who climbed into a Hellcat that month understood that they were part of a new kind of air war, one defined not by daring alone, but by preparation, analysis, and technological edge. The Pacific was a vast theater, but for these aviators, the sky above a single carrier could be the battlefield that decided life or death. And at the heart of this transformation was the F6F Hellcat, a plane whose design, training regimen, and deployment strategy converged to create a weapon capable of rewriting history in the air. Every crewman from pilot to mechanic knew the same truth: the Hellcat was not just fast. It was strategically lethal. And that lethality, grounded in meticulous planning, rigorous training, and superior engineering, set the stage for why 611 kilometers per hour would become synonymous with sky dominance, a number that carried the weight of survival skill and the relentless pace of war. July 1943, Naval Air Station, Pearl Harbor. The hangars smelled of oil fuel and anticipation. Every F6F Hellcat gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, its rivets and panels scrutinized by eyes trained to notice the smallest imperfection. For the pilots, these months of training were a crucible. They would learn that survival in the Pacific did not depend solely on courage. It depended on discipline, coordination, and an intimate understanding of the aircraft they would soon take into battle. Failures were immediate and often harsh. Early test flights revealed tendencies in the Hellcat that could be fatal if mismanaged. Engines overheated during steep climbs, fuel gauges occasionally misread under high G-forces, and control surfaces reacted differently when fully loaded with ammunition. On average, 12% of new pilots experienced training accidents significant enough to require grounding or reassignment. Each incident was analyzed, logged, and debriefed, sometimes at the cost of friendships or the pride of seasoned aviators. These failures were not setbacks, but lessons, a brutal curriculum designed to embed instinctive reactions into muscle memory. Discipline became a ritual. Pre-flight checks were repeated aloud, line by line, until they became automatic. Mechanics and pilots worked side by side, sharing knowledge of torque specifications, fuel mixtures, and the subtleties of wing flex under high-speed maneuvers. It was not just technical proficiency they built, it was trust. Trust between pilot and plane crew and carrier. The lives of men in the air depended on it. Training sorties followed a strict schedule. Each squadron flew up to 5 missions per day, rotating between gunnery practice, formation drills, and simulated combat. Fuel loads varied depending on the exercise, sometimes carrying 180 gallons for endurance climbs, other times lighter loads for agility tests. Instructors measured top speed, climb rate, and handling under combat conditions, noting every deviation. By the end of July, pilots knew precisely how their Hellcat would behave at 611 kilometers per hour, at 5,000 feet, and under the stress of a dogfight. Technical familiarization extended beyond the cockpit. Pilots memorized engine schematics and hydraulic layouts, understanding how the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine produced its 2,000 horsepower. They learned to anticipate vibrations, engine surges, and subtle shifts in handling. If a throttle linkage stiffened mid-flight, the pilot would know immediately how to compensate. Every maneuver was rehearsed until instinctive, every emergency procedure drilled until reflexive. The human element proved equally critical. Pilots practiced wingman formations for hours, understanding that survival depended not just on the aircraft, but on each other. Communication protocols, briefed and debriefed endlessly, became second nature. Radio calls were terse, precise, and universal. There was no room for improvisation under the stress of combat. A pilot who broke formation risked not only his life but the cohesion of the entire squadron. Lessons from previous encounters with Japanese Zeros were integrated continuously. Intelligence reports highlighted enemy tactics, spiral dives, tight turns, and coordinated attacks on inexperienced pilots. In response, Hellcat crews practiced counter-maneuvers emphasizing speed firepower and altitude advantage over agility alone. The aircraft's design supported these tactics. Armor plating protected the cockpit, and fuel tanks' twin 50-caliber machine guns could unleash 400 rounds per gun in bursts, and structural integrity allowed dives exceeding 6 Gs without catastrophic failure. Daily life in training was grueling. Pilots were pushed to fly up to 10 hours per day, alternating between simulators, classroom instruction, and actual sorties. Fatigue was constant, yet the regiment forged mental resilience. Mistakes were not ignored. They were logged meticulously. Every misjudged turn, every delayed throttle adjustment, every missed radio call became part of a growing archive of institutional memory, ensuring the next pilot would not repeat the error. By mid-August, the transformation was evident. Novices became instinctive aviators. Crews understood the limits of both men and machines. Trust had solidified into a bond stronger than fear. Each pilot knew that the Hellcat could be pushed, that its speed and firepower could turn a fight, but only if discipline and preparation were absolute. Loss rates during these months, while sobering, dropped to under 5% per squadron, reflecting the effectiveness of rigorous training, systematic familiarization with technology, and unwavering attention to detail. The path from failure to mastery was not linear. It was punctuated by accidents, near misses, and mechanical surprises. But each challenge reinforced a singular truth: the F6F Hellcat was only as effective as the crew who flew it, and survival required flawless execution under conditions that simulated the chaos of the Pacific sky. By the time these pilots would step onto a carrier deck, bound for combat, they carried more than maps and checklists. They carried confidence built from thousands of practiced maneuvers, hundreds of calculated risks, and the certainty that the aircraft beneath them was a machine capable of turning speed into life-saving advantage. In this crucible of engines, fuel, and discipline, the Hellcat revealed its potential. Every pilot who had survived training understood it intuitively. Speed, firepower, and technical mastery would combine to make the F6F Hellcat a skykiller. And it was here, in these months of failures, lessons, and preparation, that the foundation was laid for the battles to come, where 611 kilometers per hour would decide who lived, who fell, and who dominated the skies above the Pacific. September 15, 1943, off the coast of New Georgia, Solomon Islands. Dawn broke with a thin veil of mist over the jagged silhouettes of the Solomons. From the deck of the USS Essex, Hellcats lined up like predatory birds, their polished fuselages glinting as if aware of the battle to come. Engines hummed, throttles open, each pilot calculating lift-climb rate and the ever-present threat of enemy Zeros. The Pacific was calm, almost deceptive, yet every man aboard knew that the serenity would not last beyond the first mile. The first contact came without warning. A blip on radar, barely visible against the cluttered echo of the islands and sea, signaled approaching enemy aircraft. The radio crackled with urgency. Bogies, 12 o'clock, high altitude, 8,000 feet. Prepare for engagement. Formation leaders responded with precision. Wingmen aligned, throttles synchronized, every Hellcat accelerating toward the incoming threat. The speedometer needle flicked past 500 km/h within seconds. The pilots felt the wind screaming in their ears, the vibrations through the control stick, a constant reminder of the forces at play. The initial sweep revealed a squadron of 15 Japanese Zeros, thin-winged and deceptively agile, attempting to flank the Hellcats from the sun. Orders were terse and efficient. Alpha Flight left brake. Bravo maintain cover. Fire at will if within 400 yards. Combat unfolded in a series of precise maneuvers punctuated by bursts of gunfire and the whine of engines pushed to limits. Smoke trails marked the paths of bullets, tracer fire painting invisible lines against the bright sky. Pilots relied on training, counting rounds, calculating closure rates, adjusting for wind gravity, and the slightest deviation in target movement. One Hellcat pilot, Lieutenant James Whitaker, reported over the radio, 10 port side, 3 o'clock low. Engaging. The reply was immediate. Copy. Maintain altitude. Cover Delta. Within minutes, 2 enemy aircraft were down streaming smoke as they plummeted toward the Pacific, a testament to both training and the Hellcat's structural integrity. The kill ratio climbed quickly. 2 enemy planes for every Hellcat lost in this initial contact, and the squadron adjusted dynamically as terrain forced split-second decisions. Cloud cover and the silhouette of the islands complicated maneuvers. Pilots had to consider sudden updrafts from ridges, gusts funneled between peaks, and the deceptive optical illusions caused by sunlight reflecting off the water below. High-speed dives required meticulous attention. Even a momentary misjudgment could result in collision with terrain or a fatal stall. One pilot nearly clipped the treetops, recovering only through rapid input and reliance on instinct, honed over weeks of training. Throughout the engagement, fuel management remained critical. Each Hellcat carried 180 gallons, allowing for extended combat yet high-throttle climbs, and aggressive dogfighting consumed reserves rapidly. Pilots constantly monitored their gauges, balancing aggression with the necessity to return to the carrier. A miscalculation could strand a plane hundreds of miles from friendly decks, a solitary hunter in an indifferent ocean. The battle was chaotic but disciplined. Orders flowed over the radio like a rhythm repeated, confirmed, and adapted. Fox 1 down. Maintain formation. Re-engage high. Charlie protect 6 o'clock. Watch left flank. Roger. Copy all. Minutes stretched as adrenaline sharpened perception. Pilots observed subtle cues, the angle of enemy wings, engine smoke, evasive patterns. The Hellcat's design allowed for tighter turns at higher speed than its predecessors, giving pilots the edge in close-quarters engagements. Its top speed of 600 mm allowed rapid altitude changes, crucial in countering zero dives. By the 20-minute mark, the initial squadron engagement had claimed 4 enemy aircraft destroyed, with 1 Hellcat sustaining minor damage from gunfire, a minor repair that would be handled immediately upon return. The outcome of this first encounter swung decisively in favor of the U.S. Navy, yet pilots remained vigilant. Complacency was lethal. Every maneuver had to be precise. Wingmen communicated silently through positioning and predictable patterns developed in training. Formation cohesion allowed one Hellcat to act as a decoy, while another struck from an unexpected angle. These micro-tactics, tested and retested in simulators and training sorties, proved essential against a nimble and unpredictable adversary. Environmental factors continued to challenge pilots. Rising sun created glare at odd angles, masking enemy movement. Sudden downdrafts forced abrupt altitude corrections, and the rhythmic roll of the carrier below, visible even at distance, reminded pilots of home base, a safe return, still requiring skill and luck. The radio remained constant, a lifeline, and a channel for orders. Delta, keep eyes sharp. Enemy approaching ridgeline. Prepare for engagement at 6 o'clock. Copy Delta. Engaging high. By the end of the first major engagement, 12 enemy aircraft had been engaged, 4 destroyed with no Hellcats lost, and only minor damage to 1. The swing in outcome, achieved through superior speed, firepower, and disciplined crew coordination, demonstrated the tangible advantage that the F6F Hellcat provided. Training preparation and the rigorous schedule of sorties had crystallized into battlefield effectiveness, yet even victory carried cost. Pilots felt every near miss, every flak scar on fuselage, every burst of tracer that zipped past their wings. The ocean, calm yet unforgiving, awaited any misstep. And while radios crackled with success reports, the true test of these engagements would continue until the squadron returned safely to their carrier, fuel gauges balanced precariously between caution and operational necessity. As the sun climbed higher, the squadron regrouped, engines throttled back to conserve fuel. Deck crews and maintenance teams prepared for rapid turnaround repairs, refueling, rearming. Every man understood that this was just the opening act of the air war, a single phase of many. But in these critical minutes, the Hellcat had proven itself fast, resilient, and lethal, and the 611 km threshold was not merely a specification, but a deciding factor in life and death. Every pilot carried the same understanding. Their survival depended on skill, speed, coordination, and trust in both machine and wingman. The Pacific was a vast and unpredictable theater, but in this first clash, the Hellcat had turned theory into reality. And for the U.S. Navy, this initial engagement validated months of planning, training, and relentless preparation, setting the stage for the climactic confrontations to come. September 15, 1943, over the Solomon Islands mid-morning. The sky boiled with activity. Smoke trails cut jagged lines against the blue expanse, tracer rounds, slicing air with lethal precision. The first engagement had yielded success, but the enemy adapted quickly. A second wave of 8 Zeros approached from the sun, banking hard over the island ridge. Pilots felt the familiar surge in adrenaline. The split-second window to act had arrived. Lieutenant James Whitaker, already bloodied from minor shrapnel wounds sustained in the initial fight, spotted a Zero diving toward his squadron leader at an alarming angle. Time seemed to dilate. Instincts honed over weeks of training surged forward. Whitaker shouted into the radio, "Eagle 1 port side, incoming, cover 6. Orders were repeated, confirmed, echoed across the formation. The motif of coordinated response seen in every prior sortie drilled into muscle memory, replayed under the pressure of life and death. Whitaker pulled his Hellcat into a sharp climb, the fuselage trembling under the strain, wind screaming past, and eyes fixed on the enemy plane closing fast. It was a decision measured in milliseconds. Bank too late, and the Zero would strike. Too early, and the pilot risked stalling in mid-air or colliding with the wingman. Whitaker adjusted throttle, yanked the stick, and fired a controlled burst. Tracers stitched the sky. The enemy plane wavered, then spiraled down in smoke, disappearing into the Pacific. One life taken, another saved, but victory was never without cost. In that instant, across the formation, losses began to register. A wingman, Ensign Thomas Redding, was struck in the tail by enemy fire. His Hellcat shuddered violently before diving out of formation. Radio chatter grew urgent. Redding down, repeat. Redding down, maintain formation. Cover 6, enemy pulling left. The squadron pressed on, balancing aggression with caution. Every maneuver reminded pilots of the razor-thin margin between triumph and tragedy. The motif of preparation, coordination, and rapid response, repeated training, meeting reality, but each repetition carried an increasingly personal weight. Whitaker felt it physically, too. A minor shrapnel nick on his shoulder burned sharply, a souvenir from a near miss. Later, this would become a permanent scar, a silent witness to that day's events. Nearby, Ensign Walter Green jotted a quick note in the repair log, documenting minor damage to wing panels and control surfaces, an official record that masked the fear, the adrenaline, and the human fragility threaded through every sortie. Fuel levels dropped dangerously low. Hellcats had burned through over 120 gallons per aircraft, a reminder that even mechanical superiority could be neutralized by simple mismanagement. Pilots calculated remaining range mid-maneuver, a mental exercise layered atop aerial combat. Every decision whether to pursue a retreating Zero or conserve fuel for return carried life or death stakes. Amid the chaos, personal gestures punctuated the mechanical precision. Whitaker glanced at a folded letter tucked in his flight jacket, a note from his younger brother mailed weeks prior, urging caution and safe return. The paper felt impossibly fragile, an anchor to home in the midst of destruction. He tucked it tighter, allowing its weight to steel his resolve. Every pilot carried a fragment of personal life aloft, a silent motivation, driving every split-second decision. The climax intensified. 2 Zeros attempted to encircle the squadron leader, forcing a maneuver that would test training to its limits. Whitaker and another Hellcat pilot, Ensign Henry Morales, coordinated instinctively. Morales dove low, drawing attention, while Whitaker climbed guns trained on the trailing Zero. The sequence rehearsed countless times in drills executed in the real sky with stakes immeasurably higher. Tracers converged, smoke plumes marked trajectories, and within seconds both enemy planes were down. But the squadron had paid a cost, one Hellcat with wing damage, one pilot nursing minor shrapnel, and the psychological toll of seeing comrades nearly die. As the dust of aerial combat settled, the motif of preparation, split-second reaction, and trust repeated. Pilots returned to formation, checking one another, exchanging terse radio signals. Every motion, every glance, every tactical choice echoed lessons drilled for weeks. Yet each pilot carried the personal imprint of battle, a scar, a log entry, a letter, reminding them that triumph was inseparable from vulnerability. By mid-morning, the squadron regrouped above the island ridge. Enemy aircraft retreated, disrupted by disciplined Hellcat maneuvers and superior firepower. The engagement had lasted less than 30 minutes, but its intensity left indelible marks. Whitaker's scar burned with every turn. The repair log would later note structural flex under duress. Letters tucked in flight jackets would be read with renewed appreciation once safely returned. These personal costs, small but permanent, threaded through the narrative of victory. The Pacific, vast and indifferent, had tested men and machines alike. The F6F Hellcat had proven itself as designed, fast, resilient, and lethal, yet it was the interplay of preparation, split-second decision-making, and human endurance that had dictated the outcome. Every maneuver repeated the motif first learned in training: anticipate, communicate, act decisively. Victory was measured not just in kills, but in survival cohesion and the preservation of skill under pressure. As the squadron wheeled back toward the carrier engines throttled to conserve fuel, pilots carried silent acknowledgement of cost. They had dominated the sky for now, but the scar, the letter, the repair log entry, each a testament to personal stakes, reminded them that combat was never abstract. Every 611 climb, dive, and turn carried human consequence. The Hellcat was a weapon, yes, but wielded by men whose courage, training, and trust defined its true lethality. And in that brief span of mid-morning over the Solomons, the motif had repeated itself. Preparation met reality, split-second choices. Determined fate and personal cost was inseparable from tactical success. September 15, 1943, USS Essex, Solomon Islands. The Pacific sky had quieted, but the echoes of combat lingered in every metallic vibration aboard the carrier. Engines idled, smoke dissipated, and deck crews moved deliberately, methodically, repairing the damage inflicted during the brief but brutal engagements of the morning. Every dented wing panel, scorched fuselage, and nicked tail section was catalogued, logged, and assessed. Maintenance logs filled with annotations: Delta flight port aileron flexed, minor fuel leak, repair required before next sortie. These were not merely records, they were testimonies of human endurance, mechanical resilience, and the unforgiving precision of air warfare. Pilots, mechanics, and commanders gathered in the briefest moments between sorties, tallying the outcome of the day. Enemy aircraft, destroyed squadron losses, fuel consumption, and minor damages were meticulously tabulated. By mid-evening, the record stood clear: 12 enemy aircraft engaged, 6 destroyed, 1 Hellcat damaged, and no lives lost beyond minor injuries. The numbers told one story. The human experience told another. Fear, exhilaration, fatigue, and adrenaline had run parallel to statistics, shaping judgment and embedding lessons for future confrontations. The contrast between luck and skill became apparent during debriefings. A pilot narrowly avoided collision when an enemy aircraft broke formation unpredictably. Another had survived a direct burst of enemy fire that glanced off armor plating. In each case, meticulous training, split-second decision-making, and trust in both machine and squadron were decisive. Yet the role of fortune wind currents, enemy miscalculations, small timing margins was undeniable. Skill maximized survival, but luck preserved life in ways that no training could fully guarantee. Leadership emerged as both subtle and overt. Squadron leaders had to balance aggression with caution, issuing orders that prioritized both mission success and pilot safety. Alpha Flight's maneuvers prevented flanking by Zeros. Bravo's defensive cover allowed retreating pilots to maintain formation integrity. Decisions made in moments of chaos, who to engage, when to dive, when to conserve fuel, defined outcomes not just in tactical terms but in moral and psychological dimensions. Command was less about authority and more about trust in subordinates, trust in equipment, trust in the training ingrained through months of preparation. Repair crews worked through the night. Hydraulic lines were replaced, engine components realigned, and fuel tanks refilled to maximum operational capacity. Every panel inspected, every bolt torqued, was a silent acknowledgement that mechanical precision was inseparable from human survival. A single oversight could compromise an entire squadron in the next sortie, turning the mastery of speed into vulnerability. The interplay of human diligence and mechanical reliability underscored the cumulative lessons of preparation, discipline, and attention to detail. Amid the technical and tactical evaluation, pilots reflected privately. Lieutenant Whitaker traced the scar on his shoulder, a reminder of both personal cost and survival. Ensign Green reviewed his repair log entry, noting the minor structural stress endured during maneuvers. Letters from loved ones folded in flight jackets were read with renewed clarity, tokens of home that tethered men to a world beyond war. These moments of reflection underscored that the day's triumphs, while measurable in numbers, were also deeply human in consequence. The overarching lesson was unmistakable. The F6F Hellcat was more than a machine. It was a conduit for skill preparation and trust to manifest as decisive advantage. The aircraft's speed, firepower, and durability could only be effective when paired with disciplined pilots and coordinated crews. Each maneuver, each split-second choice had reinforced training, but each near miss reminded all that human judgment was as crucial as technological superiority. In the broader scope of the war, the encounter demonstrated a fundamental principle. Air superiority was determined not solely by numbers or hardware, but by the integration of preparation technology and human decision-making. The ability to anticipate enemy actions, maintain formation integrity, and act decisively under duress dictated outcomes, often more than sheer firepower. Lessons of leadership, risk assessment, and coordination extended far beyond the carrier deck, informing doctrine for subsequent operations across the Pacific theater. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in streaks of red and gold, a singular understanding crystallized among pilots and crew. Alike, the Hellcat had fulfilled its promise, but it was the human application of training, judgment, and trust that truly defined victory. Speed and power mattered, but they were nothing without the men who wielded them. In one line, the thesis was clear. The 611 km/h advantage of the F6F Hellcat was decisive not because of the machine alone, but because preparation, discipline, and human judgment amplified its lethal potential, lessons that transcended the battlefield and shaped the doctrine of air combat for years to come. Post-war reflection, USS Essex and beyond. The roar of the engines had faded into history, but the lessons of the Hellcat endured. After the war, the experiences of pilots and crews were codified into doctrine that would shape naval aviation for decades. Tactical manuals incorporated the principle that aircraft design training and split-second decision-making must function as a cohesive system. High-speed intercepts, coordinated formation strategies, and integrated maintenance protocols all traced their lineage back to the battles fought over the Solomons, where 611 kilometers per hour meant life or death. The F6F Hellcat became more than a weapon. It became a benchmark for future fighter design. Engineers and military strategists studied its successes, a combination of speed, firepower, and resilience that allowed relatively inexperienced pilots to match and often surpass a highly skilled enemy. The post-war era saw aircraft developed with these same principles: durability, pilot-friendly controls, and an emphasis on tactical synergy rather than relying solely on individual heroics. The Hellcat's legacy was embedded in both the machines that followed and the doctrine that guided their use. Culturally, the Hellcat symbolized the intersection of human ingenuity and disciplined execution. Veterans recounted stories of daring teamwork and survival that highlighted not only technological achievement, but also personal courage. Training regimens scarred pilots and meticulously kept logbooks became archival treasures, teaching new generations about the real cost and method of air superiority. Museums' oral histories and preserved aircraft ensured that these lessons were tangible, bridging the gap between historical record and human experience. Even today, the Hellcat's influence persists. Modern naval aviation continues to value the integration of preparation, precision, and adaptability. The principle that success is born from the harmony of technology and human judgment, first proven above the Pacific, remains central to training programs worldwide. The story of the Hellcat reminds us that superior design and disciplined execution can decisively alter outcomes even against formidable odds. For those who study aviation history, the legacy of the Hellcat is unmistakable. Speed alone was insufficient. Skill training and trust transformed a machine into a decisive force. It was a lesson carried forward into post-war doctrine, shaping not only aircraft, but also the philosophy of combat itself. The combination of human courage and technological advantage set a standard, a model for future conflicts, where preparation and precision would be paramount. Subscribe for archival-based stories, evidence over sensationalism. Explore history as it truly unfolded. Witness the lessons embedded in steel smoke and human resolve, and appreciate how machines like the F6F Hellcat defined not only their era, but the principles that guide aviation today. These are not tales of heroism alone. They are lessons in strategy preparation and the enduring impact of calculated speed, decision-making, and human ingenuity.